Hey everyone, welcome to Geeking Out, the podcast in which we dive into the career journeys of some of the amazing humans in tech and geek out on topics like software development, DevOps, observability, reliability, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adriana Vilela, coming to you from Toronto, Canada. And geeking out with me today, I have Diana Todea. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, Adriana, how are you?
Lovely. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. Here in Valencia, Spain.
Awesome, awesome. Now, is it warm? We're recording this in January. It's freaking cold here in Toronto. It's zero, but it feels like a cold zero. How about in Valencia?
Well, it's not that bad, but it's like around 12 degrees maybe. But it feels a lot colder because of humidity.
Oh yeah, yeah. That'll get you. That'll get you. I missed the 12 degrees. I think we had a 12-degree day last week on Friday. And I'm like, yay! I can wear running shoes instead of boots. It was glorious. Well, cool.
Nice.
We're going to get started with our icebreaker questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
All right. Do you prefer iPhone or Android?
Android.
Do you prefer Mac, Linux, or Windows?
Mac.
All right. Do you have a favorite programming language?
No, not really, but I've been programming in Python, although I can switch to something else if, I find it easier, more convenient.
Cool. I'm a huge fan of Python myself, so yay. Yay, Team Python. Awesome. Do you prefer dev or ops?
Dev for sure. Yeah.
All right. Do you prefer JSON or YAML?
Wow. Uh, those are really hard questions. Yeah, maybe like okay, neither, but
Fair, fair. If you had to choose your one that you hate less.
yeah, I don't know, maybe YAML.
Fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough. Next question. Do you prefer spaces or tabs?
Oof. Yeah, spaces.
All right. And do you prefer to consume content through video or text?
Both.
And then finally, what is your superpower?
My superpower, I don't know, maybe I think being a polyglot, so I speak like five languages, but I really know very well only four. So I just say five to impress more people, but I kind of forgot the fifth one. So I think that will be my superpower.
What are the five languages?
Right, so Romanian, my native language,
Mhm.
English, French, Spanish, and I used to know German.
Ooh, very cool. That's amazing. I'm always so impressed by people who not only know multiple languages but can communicate effectively in multiple languages, like mad skills. And do you like when you create content, have you created content in different languages?
Yeah, so this is something that's yeah, definitely. So I've been writing in Spanish and Romanian. So I created last year a brand new community actually for OpenTelemetry for the translations in Romanian. And this year I'm actually going to produce a lot more content in Spanish and hopefully French as well.
Ooh.
So yeah, that's so many dimensions.
That is very cool. I definitely want to get back to the open telemetry work that you do, because I think it's really cool. But first, I love to talk to my guests about like their tech origin stories. Did you always have an affinity towards tech from an early age, or did that come later in life for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I wasn't like a geek in tech. I was a geek in foreign languages. So
Ooh,
a geek on the other side, on let's say how I say like literature,
yeah,
like not the math subjects basically.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean I went to actually since primary school I did foreign language. So my first foreign language I learned was French when I was 8. Then I started with English and a bit of German. So by the time I entered high school, I entered into in a bilingual class. So yeah, at my high school. So I did the remain. I mean, I did all the high school in French and English. Like it was like a advanced kind of
Yeah.
studies of French and English. But yeah, I never describe myself as being a geek in the sciences or the tech
Yeah.
stuff. That came later, like really
Oh,
late. So maybe that's my story, unique story about that.
that's cool. So what did you study in university?
I studied philosophy, so I
Oh,
was a
cool.
super nerd of philosophy. I loved it so much. I discovered it when in high school.
Yeah.
So because I don't know, in high school, I like to read a lot. So I wasn't having the prototypical high school fun that I should have had, and I was spending my time with books or doing theater, whatever. And then at one point, I discovered in library like philosophy, and I was like, I like this stuff, And I was like, man, maybe I should apply at the university for philosophy. And I was like, and everybody was like, what are you doing with philosophy? And is that like a real career? Like, are you crazy? What are your parents gonna say about that? Like,
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, in my head it was like everything, like you should go with your passion. You should study
Yeah.
that, and later just figure it out. And actually, I did that. I studied and I applied for the philosophy faculty. I did the whole 4 years. I mean, back in my day it was like 4 years. And I really went like full crazy. So I remember that I did the master's, then I did another master, then I applied for PhD. I went to France for the Erasmus. Actually, I had a year in France for the Erasmus scholarship.
Hmm.
Then I applied for a PhD scholarship. I got it, and I went to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland.
Cool.
Uh, so I was like, I was really determined to be an academic, actually, like deep crazy, And my bachelor degree was on political philosophy,
Uh-huh.
actually, on anarchist capitalism. And then in France, I did a master thesis on phenomenology and metaphysics in French. So I wrote
Cool.
that in French. And then when I came back to Romania, I applied for the PhD at the University of Edinburgh for political philosophy again. And I was supposed to do like a full degree of PhD, but in my second year of PhD, I got demoted, sort of like, how to say, downgraded by my professors, which was like a real shock because your professor supervisor should have your back, not
Yeah.
downgrade you. But anyway, it was like a weird thing. But in the end, anyway, I was happy afterwards that it happened like this. And I, instead of actually finishing the PhD degree, I finished an MPhil thesis, which is like the next under it. And
Okay.
I published my book. Actually, I finished it successfully. And then I came back home to Romania because I had like a scholarship contract to come back home. And I didn't want to actually I didn't want to be a professor at my university because the professors I actually offered me a job there, and I didn't want to.
Hmm.
And the next thing that was available on the market at that time in Romania was IT. I had zero skills about IT, but luckily for me, they were offering the training on the job. So I was like, yeah, okay. I signed in, and that was like my first, let's say, IT job without knowing anything about technology.
Oh my God. That is such an interesting way to get into tech.
Yeah, that was mad crazy because I come from a family actually of engineers. So
Uh-huh.
my grandfather, my father, they all worked in how to say, as engineers at the railways. So they were like
Oh, okay.
they deal with like really how can I say, electronists? Is
Oh,
that so? Actually, my grandfather was responsible of a big project in Romania
yeah.
to supervise the electrification of railways in Romania back in his time.
Yeah.
So he was like a real dude doing um, engineering stuff. Then my father did that as well. And then my brother studied also polytechnics. At that point, I was like, no, man, I'm not doing that. Don't get me started. I mean, I know maybe my brain could do it, but I
Yeah.
definitely want to explore other venues. But in the end, I got pulled into tech because that was like a very good job, to be honest. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still doing this after 15, 16 years later. Yeah.
That is so cool. Now, question for you, because I feel like a philosophy, like all the work that you've done in philosophy, like the undergraduate, the graduate work, almost like primes your brain for a job in tech, right? Doesn't part of philosophy involve like classes in logic and stuff like that as well? Or
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's also in the university they teach you two different classes of logic. So one is like sort of like a basic one, and one is more advanced.
Mhm.
So you cannot get rid of that, and actually that's freaking hard.
Yeah.
I actually got they failed me on the advanced logics because it was so hard, and we had like a crazy professor. But yeah, definitely it's like it's very math like, so
Yeah.
you learn like all the thingies, and it was like really really cool, and actually all the abstraction, all the arguments that you need to write your theses and your papers are, let's say, very very abstract. So it's not like literature, basically it's like
Yeah.
how I say, the weird sister in the family of non-technical whatever subjects. So it's
Yeah.
closer to mathematics as it can be, let's say.
That's really cool. Now, I wanted to ask you because you mentioned like when you were um, working towards your PhD in Edinburgh and you got downgraded, and you said that ended up being a good thing for you. And I think it's worth calling that out because I think there's so many times in life where like crappy things happen, and it's like in at the end of the day it's like it ends up being disguised as a good thing. You just don't realize it at the time. I'm not saying that applies to everything, but it is kind of nice to see that sometimes that happens. So how did that end up turning from like this crappy thing to a good thing in your life?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that was, I mean, at the time I was really so mad and so infuriated because I was like really really passionate about what I was doing. I had all my life planned out,
Yeah.
everything. I was like really engine on being in philosophy, and then I got so disappointed about everything. So it kind of like, for me, was like a cold shower basically
Hmm.
of reality, because up to that point I was like 26 or 27, everything went perfectly, in my life. So no like hurdles, no problems, everything went as as it can get. So that was like the real like a life lesson. That was a point in my time when I actually understood that life is not supposed to be like in the movies. So that was a catch just right there, and I was like, I took it well, but also hard. So I kind of
Yeah.
like swallowed up all my pride, like all the rage I had. Like I was literally about to kick my professor's head off, like in that moment.
I
And I
can
had that,
imagine. I can
like,
imagine.
I was like, it was like a pure rage inside me, but because also it was a frustration, obviously built after years of sacrifice and learning and everything. And it was like, what am I supposed to do now? It's like also the thing that people are not prepared, or like let's say like young generations are not prepared for failure, right? So you
Hmm.
take for example like young people that are so determined to do something, or they're like overachievers, or they're like always pushing themselves. I'm gonna do this and that, and then the first failure, you're gonna see them drop really
Yeah.
low.
Yeah.
They're not accustomed. They don't know how to deal with failure. And this is, I think, the point when you say, like just saying in the movies, you either rise or you're gonna just keep it be down. And in that point, I think it was like luckily for me, it was like a struggle, but I could also manage it in the same time. So I took it seriously, but I said, look, I'm gonna go ahead, do my work, just shut up, Diana. Maybe there's some reasoning there in the universe that this is happening. And I did my work, and I think that was the point where I understood, man, doesn't matter. You have to honor your stuff. You have to finish it. You have to struggle, go through it, and just like focus the future. And afterwards, like you said, I didn't know if that was a good thing or not. But several years later, maybe 5 or something like this, I was like, this is beginning to shape in a direction which I like, right? So
Hmm.
when the moment I was not, I was already starting in tech. I was like really at the beginning of everything to learn. I had so much to learn, but slowly and slowly, I kind of like as soon as I got out of that beginner bubble, I understood, man, this is actually like a good job. I could pick out my projects. I could go to other countries. I'm not like one of these like boring jobs, office jobs, where I'm get stuck there like all my life. And after 10 years, or I don't know, I actually met a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, one of my colleagues that was at the PhD at the same time with me. And I got scared because I was happy, I was looking young-ish, and that person wasn't. That person was sad, was like looking older, than it was supposed to look. And he was like constantly struggling with finding the next job. I was like, man, I'm so happy that this didn't work out for me in the way it should have. So yeah, ever since, I think the universe planned it correctly for me. Yeah.
And I love that you emphasize, the importance of failing because you're so absolutely right on that. Um, I think not only are kids not prepared to fail these days, I also think like high achievers have this like very high expectation on themselves as well. Like I grew up as an overachiever in high school and university, and I remember the first time I failed a quiz in university, and I'm like, how dare this happen to me? How could this happen? Like, you almost feel entitled. It's like, no, no, I'm a high achiever. I work hard. I'm smart. I deserve this grade. But then for me, it was a huge wake up call because I realized for that quiz, I slacked off, and so then it kind of forced me. It was like a wake up call of like, oh, you got to actually like pay attention. And I was dating this guy at the time who was like, one of those annoyingly smart people who like don't even have to go to class and they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so he was skipping class. I'm like, I'm smart too. I can skip a class too. And I realized I am not that kind of smart. I am a have to attend class to know what's going on kind of smart, and so that was a wake up call for me. Yeah, but like failure takes on so many forms, and like we learn so much more from it.
Yeah, true. And I think this is so important. I think for me, definitely at that time was something like a very, and it hurt for quite a long time because I'm this kind of person that, introverts have this like
Mhm.
unique feature that they keep on like something that happened billions of years ago, and they skip thinking about it, and they have like this great memory there. You have everything, like you remember, like who cares, man? Like in the grand scheme of the universe, nobody cares, like literally nobody. And also it was like for me it was like I let it go slowly and slowly because other things happened in life that piled onto. I was like, this is not important. So you're gonna get other like lessons, important life lessons, and you're gonna understand that you need to be modest and you need to be, how can I say, uh, put down in a way. Like life needs to like properly set you in your corner, because otherwise you will not understand other important lessons. And like I think I'm happy that I got that wake up call then, because it could have been a lot worse later. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most perfect way of putting that. Now, I wanted to go back to like your first tech job. So what was your first tech job?
Oh yeah, I'm so embarrassed to say this. I'm like, I was one of the privileged persons to be, I would say, the call center person, right?
Ooh, my
I would
goodness.
say,
That builds resilience.
oh yeah. So imagine, you're like a totally introvert, you hate speaking on the phone, and then you're put to speak with total random persons on the phone, obviously about tech stuff. So we had like technical trainings. I was lucky that actually Romania has like a very, I want to say, solid IT, like a technology. industry, so it's one
Hmm.
of like the top ones. We have very very good tech people there. So at a normal call center, you got like a very strong technical training. So I learned, actually I was on some telecommunication company, and I was learning networking. And I learned my very basic networking about routers, switches, everything. So everything, it was like pretty cool, and I learned really fast. But yeah, I had to do my years of call center, man. I've been there. I did so. I mean, yeah, I did quite a lot of years of that actually.
Oh, how many
So
years did you do the call center thing?
the call center per se was maybe 3 years or something like
Oh,
this.
damn.
But then I got promoted in a way to
Hmm.
tech support. But tech support is just a glorified kind of call center. I mean,
Right.
if you ask me, if you give me headphones and I have to talk with somebody that I don't want to talk about, and I have to support something technical, that's for me is just like, yeah, tomato is the same thing.
Wow,
Let's face it.
that's really cool though, because like I'm totally the same as you. I hate getting on the phone and talking to people. And when I was a kid, I would be like half an hour planning out a phone call for like a 5 minute phone call, and just like so much anxiety just to get on the phone with a person that I didn't even know. And so to be able to push through that, that deep discomfort, I think is such a testament to like your resilience. I think being able to do things that make us uncomfortable and push through that, I think is huge. What would you say is like your biggest lesson learned from your call center years?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that besides resilience, that build patience, right, and builds that modesty I was talking about. Like adding layers and layers of, not, I wouldn't say not caring, but layers of understanding how to deal with people, how to
Hmm.
calm down your emotions, like your raw emotions, because oh boy, I was raw. So I didn't know how to control my emotions. Like, it's like I was just pure me, and I learned how to like breathe, take a moment, filter things in your head, speak to people. And it was like really hard at the beginning, but it made me into an adult, to be honest. I wasn't
Hmm.
an adult at that point. I didn't know how to communicate. Probably I'm not a super great communicator right now. Even, if you take I'm gonna say an extrovert and compare me, that was like, pff, I'm bad at this, but still I did a lot of work, and I did it consciously, so I was aware of what I was doing. And I think this is what, it's more difficult when you're seeing yourself, put into a specific context or a role, and you're like, for you, it's hard work, it's like, oh man, I literally, although it was like a silly job for me, it's like, oh man, I'm going into the coal mine, I'm doing this is heavy, man, this is like really like. And I was like, my parents like, what are you talking about, man? Like, this is like a silly job, like literally. And I was like, yeah, but it's so painful, I have to speak with all these people. And for me, yeah, build patience, but patience, it build resilience. It build like, like a normal adult-ish kind of behavior, and also made me a better communicator and listener. And for me, like it gave me a new perspective of understanding people, right? So I was very kind of snappy at judging people, oh, he, she, whatever is dumb, they don't know this or that. But then, like with time, it's like, this is not about that, I mean, people they don't have time to read a stupid manual about how to, I don't know, connect a phone or whatever, a camera. It's like, and these people need help. In the end, the whole point was a humbling exercise of helping people, and
Yeah.
I think it really built me up during those years.
That's great, and I'm sure like all that sort of all these skills have made you the DevRel that you are now. And so after like your because like now you work in the cloud native space, how did you make that transition from like call center focusing on like networking equipment into the cloud native space and doing what you do now as a developer advocate?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a long journey, to be honest. I mean, some people spend years at the same job. I spent months. So for me, it was like imperious to move on and to experience different projects, different whatever environments. So, I mean, I don't. I said that to other people. It's like you don't have to do like I did, but I wanted. For me, I wanted to experiment. I was a fast learner. I said I don't want to lose time. I already did, I don't know, 7 years of philosophy. I'm not going to spend 7 years in a call center job, the same job, just to be, I don't know, manager one day. So I knew that I didn't want to do that. So I burned really fast through projects, through companies, through roles. And if I'm going to show you my CV, yes, I have like maybe around 20 jobs or something like that.
Oh,
And
damn.
I'm proud of that. So I'm proud of the fact that that I burned through that, and I was curious, and that came slowly, to be honest. So I I went through a lot of few years of call center, then technical support, then graduating to like a level 2 of technical support. I moved to Spain, and then my last tech support job was actually in 2019, and then I made it afterwards into SRE, so site reliability engineering, into observability, which I really liked. I wasn't, fully aware of what that is, but I knew that I really, really like it. And Cloud Native came much later. So it came later in the sense that although I knew what was like open source, I played around with a few things to actually work in Cloud Native started in 2024 ish. So back with OpenTelemetry, when I started to hear about OpenTelemetry actually from you and other DevRels, promoting OpenTelemetry, talking about OpenTelemetry, so it came actually just like two years ago, more or less.
And how was like your first SRE role? Like had the work that you had been doing. So if I understand correctly, like you went from the call center world to like an SRE role, is that correct?
So call center was just like a few years in. Then I started with tech support, so doing like tech support for other tech companies,
Mhm.
different tech companies. And I discovered the cloud. So I was at some point working with cloud, actually with Amazon, Azure, etc., but doing tech support. And then I discovered the world of observability, because observability was used obviously with a lot of cloud providers. I started using Grafana, Kibana, well, the whole Elastic stack, different other bits and pieces. And then I was lucky actually to apply for an observability SRE role in Spain. And this is how I got the job. So yeah, I did my years of tech support as well.
Oh, cool. So the tech support primed you because then you got like your cloud native experience like with the various different cloud providers and then it was
Yeah.
like almost like a I guess a relatively seamless transition.
Yes, it was like a few years of pain and sufferance, because I always say that if you have to speak with people that you don't know and you just have to, that is not really like effortless or any, if you don't enjoy it, then it's painful.
How was it to work as an SRE? Like were the hours like long? Was it because I like some people I know like I at one point I managed a team and we are like setting up an on-call schedule and one of the guys on my team he had I think just gotten too many like so much on-call work, so like so much PTSD from that that he's like I can't. I just can't. Like only under like special circumstances. How was that for you? Like the on-call stuff? Was it jarring? Was it like or were you like okay with it?
Yeah, so well, luckily or unluckily for me, I already did the on-call stuff when I was in tech support,
Uh,
and actually the whole call center prepares you for that, because I also work nights, weekends, so tech support prepares you for everything. So basically, SRE has some parts of tech support, or like support itself, because you are supporting your infrastructure. It's just not for external customers; it's for internal customers. So it's for your own infrastructure. But most SREs that I know, so it's like 90%, they come from tech support, because they have this, built up basically experience of how to support different bits and pieces of infrastructure. They have been sysadmins or whatever. So they really have to have a thick back. So I already did my years of on calls, if all the nights, weekends, whatever. I wasn't yet burned out, but definitely I saw a lot of colleagues of mine being burned out and suffering a lot from it. For me, it was actually a nice experience as an SRE, because it wasn't that painful. So we had a large company, observability company, and our SRE team was quite large. So we rotate among our teams, and I think my on call was once every 3 months, which is really nice,
Oh
in
wow.
the sense that we do a 1 week of on call every 3 months. That's posh.
Yeah,
you know
that is super reasonable. Yeah, that does sound very posh for for an on-call schedule.
exactly. That was privileged, and again, that came after years of technical support. The on call in the technical support, that it did, its toll on me. It had its toll on me. So yeah.
Isn't it wild that like all the stuff that you had been doing from the beginning of your tech career, even your philosophy career, I guess, to a certain extent, like prepared you for that moment as an SRE to be able to
Yeah.
handle that. Like I feel like it made you, it sounds like it made you very like mentally resilient.
Oh yeah. And I think I think everything builds up, because anyway, unconsciously or not, you're gonna end up in the place where you are actually supposed to be at. And yeah, it built, to be honest, it built a patience in me, and also like a sort of calmness. And I'm happy that I didn't burn out,
Yeah.
because that would be like really really bad. Actually, I really don't recommend that. And once you're burned out, especially if it's later on in your life, it's very hard to recover from that and find your path, and find your energy, yourself. And yeah, it's hard. And for me, I realized actually when I was an SRE in my last year or so, I went to my first conference. The conference, I gave a talk, and I really loved it. I was like, dude, is this thing called DevRel, like developer advocates, and they like spend their time giving talks all day long. Like, what is this? I
It's a
have to do
job.
this. I have to do this. So this is how I discovered DevRel, to be honest.
That's so cool. What was your first conference?
That was in actually a site reliability engineering conference in London, in UK. SRE Day. That was really nice, and there were quite a lot of female speakers as well. And I really liked that. I was like, oh, it's not only dudes, so I could definitely find this working out. So yeah, and I got super curious. After I came back from the conference, I started like preparing CFPs and sending CFPs to a lot of conferences. And for me, like the next year, so the following year, besides my normal full-time job as an SRE, I spoke to 15 events, which is a lot. And I
It
was
is.
like, if I could do that while I'm working as an SRE, what can I just like be a DevRel, or developer advocate, and just do this full time?
So that led you to search for DevRel opportunities, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. And you've been and your job at Victoria Metrics is your like first official DevRel position, right?
Yeah, it's my first official DevRel position in observability. I had a very brief one that didn't work out, because in the end it was not me. It was like an official developer advocate, but on another company that wasn't observability, and also was focused more on partnerships rather than full DevRel or developer advocacy. So I said like I was happy actually to join Victoria Metrics, because it's an observability company. I get to do what I really like, and it's open source, and it's I can fully go in with the cloud native stuff I've been doing in the last year, and it's totally me.
That's awesome. And you've been kicking ass, let me tell you. I see you all over the place on LinkedIn, like all the stuff that you're doing. I think it's incredible. I think like it's such a role model. Like you're such a role model to other women, not just for all the work that you're doing, but also like you are a mom.
Yes, I have two small kids, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I'm a mom of toddlers, and yeah, I mean it's hard to find a balance between being a mom, working full time, traveling. It's yeah, it's taking its toll. But I like what I'm doing.
I totally get it. I find motherhood is one of those things where like you basically have two jobs. And sometimes you suck at both. Sometimes you excel at one and suck at the other.
Yeah.
There's just like no way to win, and we just try to get through it as best as we can, and that's all we can hope for.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think, and I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in the mom job you ever get kudos from somebody. Want to actually, give you congratulations on that job. I mean, your kid probably will say from time to time, "Hey, I love you," or
Yeah,
they hug you, they kiss you, but nobody's gonna hand you like a statue or something like, "Oh, yeah, well done, mom. Here you go, have some fun," or whatever.
that is so true. I totally agree with you. It is a thankless job, and it's like it's such an important job, and to be like a role model for our kids as well, to show them like I think it's so important for moms of small children, whether you have boys or girls, to show them like, yeah, my mom is kicking ass and working and doing the thing, and so that they know. Like I grew up with a mom who was a stay at home mom, and she always told me, the best thing you can do for yourself is to be independent. So she always encouraged my sister and me to like make sure that no matter what, we had jobs, that if shit ever hit the fan, we still had the means of financially supporting ourselves, because you never know what life can throw at you, and that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, no, actually, I agree with this 100%. I mean, my mom was has worked all her life, but she had the same philosophy, and she told me exactly the same thing. And my mom, I always look at my mom as a role model in terms of career, because she had like she worked all her career from like the entry level up to the highest level until she retired. I was like, Mom, you did this, you're not like some fancy person that had money or fancy college degrees, but you did it through very hard work. Yes, there were times when family was, you cannot be like fully excelling at your work and at the family. So, but I mean, moms have such great, how can I say, hard times in general. When they get home, the least thing they want to hear or expect is you're doing a shitty job being a mom. I
Yeah.
mean, you spent your day working. Don't do that to your partner, right? So don't say that ever. So I think we're very much neglected and misunderstood because of history and whatever society and culture. And now whenever you see a like a strong woman or a hardworking mom in tech, you're like automatically supposed to suck at being a mom, and yeah, I have very big sensitivity around this topic, because yeah, we cannot excel at many things, but we are trying and we have to be tolerant as much as we can with each
Yeah.
other, male or female. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I want to do a little plug also, because Diana was part of a live stream that I had. And it's a working moms in tech panel for Geeking Out. And I'll provide the link in the show notes. But we discuss like, what what it's like being a working mom in tech. We discuss various aspects of it. And I think having these conversations and bringing them up over and over and over again is super important, because I think it's important for like other women to see people who look like them. It's so encouraging. Like for me, when I joined Cloud Native, before I joined Cloud Native, I was kind of in a predominantly man's world. And I don't know what it is about Cloud Native, but I found more of my people. Like that's where I started working with more women interestingly enough, like women in tech specifically. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like so cool to have peers, actual peers who are women in tech. Which
Yep.
for me was like mind blowing, and to have that and to have people to look up to and to meet other women and to collaborate with other women on talks. And, we've submitted some talks together, fingers crossed that they get accepted. But yeah, it's incredibly empowering to have that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think like we talk actually quite, we should talk more about these subjects because it's not the whole about thing about, male, men versus women or that. No, it's just, we need to explain more the discourse behind that, because men have been such a backbone of society for a long time. And it's like not talked about enough, and all the hardships that you have, yeah, supporting your family, all the things that builds patience and resilience, and all the things that you don't say out loud and actually makes you a very good worker, a very resilient worker, and a worker that shows off, does a job, shuts up about recognition, and delivers. That's it. And moms excel at that. It's not about talking about yourself all day long. It's just doing the work, and that's it. Done.
Yeah, silently supporting society. The hidden
Yes.
figures, right? Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wanted to, before we wrap up, touch on two things because you're one of the organizers of Cloud Native Days Romania. So I want to give you an opportunity to give a plug for that and tell folks about
Yes.
it.
Yes, totally. Yeah, Cloud Native Days Romania happens on the 18th and 19th of May this year. It's happening in Bucharest, so that's the capital of Romania. We're going to have excellent food, a nice location that's like one of the coolest hotels in Bucharest, in the center. And definitely, it's going to be my second time there, and we have a very good vibe, very good people. So yeah, also around 400 attendees. We expect around 400 attendees, so that's not small at all. So definitely check it out.
And this is the previous iteration of the conference was a KCD Romania, right?
Correct. Yeah, we worked a KCD, and that was really cool. That was before I became an organizer, and since last year we switched to Cloud Native Days format. I think many events switched to the Cloud Native Days format, and right now I think we're gonna roll with this for the time being.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. So hope folks have a chance to attend this awesome conference. I submitted a few talks, so
Ooh,
fingers crossed.
yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, and I'll include links in the show notes for of the socials for Cloud Native Days Romania, so people can follow. I know you guys are on Instagram for sure. I'm assuming LinkedIn as
Yes,
well.
we are like only LinkedIn, in Instagram, I think.
And then final thing I wanted to ask you about, and I think you talked about it a little bit in the beginning, which was your involvement in OpenTelemetry, and you're involved in the like the Romanian translation of the OpenTelemetry docs, and huge
Yep.
shout out to that because initially, like when OpenTelemetry first came out in 2019, the docs were only in English, and in the last few years, we've been able to add more and more languages. And it's incredible that you were able to start a group that contributes to Romanian translation. When how did that go about? Like to decide, hey, we want to have this available in Romanian. So how do you
Yep.
talk to the right people for that?
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry like came to me like when I was in SRE. Like I said, I was seeing a lot of push in the observability world, and after a few POCs and this and that in my own company, I said like I want to contribute directly to the project, right? So I want to like really help, and like the easiest, like most accessible way to do it was through documentation. So I saw that I'm based in Spain. I speak Spanish. The Spanish community was active. They were looking for Spanish contributors. So this is how I got in. I got to know the community a lot better. I started contributing actually to the Spanish content, and I started to give talks more about OpenTelemetry, getting to know the community, and slowly, getting to know the maintainers, etc. And then, after a few months of contributing to the Spanish documentation, I said, "Look, but I'm a Romanian native. I speak Romanian. How about I help out and I open this community even more, and we start with the Romanian translations." And actually, the maintainers were really nice. They explained to me like the whole process. Also, the fact that we have to organize between ourselves, get more contributors. I got the people excited about this, so we're having right now our monthly meetups. We got our first contributor to the pages besides me, so that's nice. They already translated a couple of pages, so I'm like, yay, that's good. And I think it's a very good entry point for new contributors. Um, for new contributors actually to start contributing to cloud native. I mean, documentation is probably the best. It doesn't have to be like a software contribution, a code contribution. You can contribute through documentation, and actually, it's funny stuff. Like the people in my Romanian, let's say, team or community, they're actually software engineers wanting to do documentation work, which is like
What?
something you see every day. Exactly. Like, okay, that's weird, but anyway, it's fun because for them probably it's actually something that they want to do, so it's exciting, and yeah, we are doing this on our free time, right? So because you can have individual contributors like in your own free time, but you can also have, through your company, when you're actually supporting your company's work in cloud native. And I think that's a very important distinction. I contributed as an individual contributor, and all the people that I'm working with at the moment, the same we are individual contributors. And I really appreciate the fact that they're giving their free time for to do this. And yeah, I think it's important because it popularized it a lot, not only the project, but the fact that the documentation itself, the technical concepts can have a different flavor in a different foreign language, And anyway, Romanian is spoken only in Romania, so I'm happy to put that little cross there for my country.
That's amazing. And it speaks to like making open telemetry accessible because, those of us who are English speakers, we take it for granted that we speak and understand English well enough to work effectively in it, but that's not the case for everyone. And then by not having documentation in other languages, you're potentially excluding some brilliant people who could make such amazing contributions, or excluding them even from just using open telemetry. So I kudos to you and the work that you're doing around that.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Well, awesome. This has been such a great conversation with you, and we are coming up on time. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words of wisdom or hot takes that you wanted to share with our audience.
Sure. I would say like I mean, my journey through tech right now, it seems like, very creative or very weird, but I think that you don't have to get hung up on details. You have to do, I mean, I would say to do whatever you like, and just be very ambitious from the beginning, right? So if you really want to do something, don't procrastinate, right? Don't just say I'm gonna do it later. Just do it now because time really goes faster, and you're never gonna do that thing that you say you're gonna do later, and leave some space for surprises, right? For yourself as well, and for your well-being, because you can get so excited about a lot of projects, and they could give you so much joy and happiness, and you never know. So yeah, be nice to you and be nice with other people.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Diana, for geeking out with me today. And y'all don't forget to subscribe and be sure to check the show notes for additional resources and to connect with us and our guests on social media. Until next time,
Peace out and geek out.
Geeking Out is hosted and produced by me, Adriana Vilela. I also compose and perform the theme music on my trusty clarinet. Geeking Out is also produced by my daughter, Anna Maxwell, who incidentally designed all of the cool graphics. Be sure to follow us on all the socials
by going to bio.site/geekingout.